Hi, Misha here, and here's another HK P7. Relatively recently, we showed you a P7-M8, and since this came around, figured we'd show you its weight loss younger brother, the HK P7-M8, the single stack 8+1 capacity version. This one here seems to have been made in 1986. And it's in nice shape. Pretty much the same gun. But, I don't know. I would take a look at it. Dig into it. It's here. You're here. I'm here. It's a nice day outside. Why not? And before that, if you could, please do like, share, and subscribe. And check out the older M13 video if you haven't. And if you'd like to help support us, check out Patreon. With that, let's just dive in. The P7's design and specifications are directly related to its requirements. Of course, in 1972, there was the Munich Olympic massacre, terrorist attack, and that really pushed West German forces to go bigger and better, plus other events too, communism and all that, from 32 caliber 7.65 guns, even 380, up to full 9x19 Parabellum NATO Luger. There were, of course, the 9mm Super, the 9mm Police, the Ultra Trials guns, the 9x18. We've looked at the Walther PP Super, but that was an interim solution. Anywho, the requirements for a new police pistol were pretty strict. It needed to be about the same size and weight as a PPK, kind of in that category, but firing the larger cartridge. It needed to be truly ambidextrous, and maybe most importantly for this design, it needed to be safe to carry not only in a holster, but even a pocket, like undercover work. So safe to carry with one in the chamber, but also able to be pulled out and made ready to fire without any extreme manipulation. So basically, no chambering around or no external manual safety that needed to be toggled. And that's where the original gun kind of got its specs from. In 1976, HK first revealed the PSP, basically Police Service Pistol, and in 79 it would go into mass production, and of course it would be adopted as the P7 alongside the Sig Sauer P225, becoming the P6, and the Karl Walther P5 being the P5, which itself was updated and modernized P38 of all things. So that's kind of why the specs are what they are for this gun. And in 1983, we would have quite a big revision. As we talked about in the M13 video, that gun started off as a submission to the XM9 trials in America. And then it would be carried over to the M8 as its single stack counterpart, and both of these would be officially unveiled in 1983. So technically the M13 probably was 1981 in its prototype form. Even though it didn't win the trials, yeah, HK would release it. The same thing actually happened with the Walther P88, and for that matter to some extent to the Sig P226. Those trials actually resulted in quite a few things. So there are quite a few updates to the design. We already talked about the heat shield inside. Because of the gas piston system, there was an area where the heat would collect on rapid fire, because this was meant to be a service pistol, so not really fired duration. It wasn't a combat pistol, but still it was there. They also took the opportunity to enlarge the trigger guard for better use with gloves, and they slightly reworked and lengthened and widened the trigger, all for just kind of better ergos and use there. Also has the hook in the front with serrations. They also reworked the firing pin for durability and dependability a little more, and they added this kind of bushing extension on the back, which is partially why the gun is a little longer. They also reworked the rear sight and its dovetail into the slide, just to improve the sight picture, especially pulling it out and also being able to replace it. And then finally, of course, both the M8 and M13 have the paddle mag release. The original PSP had a European heel release here. A lot of markets prefer the paddle release, myself included. So when they pulled that away, they put the lanyard loop here in its place. Sticks out a little bit, but not too far. And those are the major updates for this system. So yeah, just like the M13, this is a gas-delayed recoil system with a little piston under the barrel. Holds open on an empty mag. Releases here. That's also, of course, your squeeze cocker. HK paddle mag release, which I love. True ambidexterity. Blued. Pretty standard looking mags, frankly. Lanyard loop at the base. Pretty standard iron sights. Because it's an 80s gun, only serrations in the rear. But then again, the M8 does have the heat shield here, unlike the PSP, so there is that. That's a good thing. And of course, no rail under the barrel. This is before rails, as you know. So pretty standard controls, but it's an HK, very smooth. Spring's not too bad. If it were a straight blowback, it'd be stiffer, but having that gas piston does alleviate it a little bit. As far as the tech specs, the P7 series has a barrel just over 4 inches, about 4.1. The overall length is slightly different between the PSP, the M8, and the M13, mostly just because of the system's use. The PSP is the shortest at about 6.5 inches. The M8 is about 6 3/4 inch, and the M13, mostly because of the larger grip and everything, is just a hair under 7 inches long. So not a big difference, but worth pointing out. Consequently, as you would expect, the weight is a little bit different. The PSP is the lightest at about 27.5 ounces. The M8 is almost the same at about 28 ounces, with the half-ounce difference really just being the added heat shield and girth there. And not surprisingly, the M13 is the heaviest at right at, or just a hair over, 30 ounces. So really not that big of a difference. I guess I should mention the P7-M8, the 40 Smith & Wesson, is the heaviest at nearly 45 ounces because it's on a steel frame and all that beefed up. And finally, the thickness. Your M8 here is about 1.1 inches, depending on exactly which grip. And the M13 you'd expect to be a lot wider, but it's really not. It's just over 1.3, again, depending on the grips, because these are pretty girthy grips, even though it's a single stack mag. But it also gives pretty good grip. You can tell these were designed for duty and carry based on their size and weight, and for that day and time. And since it's not a polymer gun, not bad at all. In the last video, there were quite a few questions about the trigger system of the squeeze cocker, so I thought I would address them here. To squeeze it, it requires 16 pounds, but obviously you can get 2, even 3 fingers on, and it pivots at the bottom. But once it's depressed, as we already mentioned, it only takes a couple of pounds of force to hold it. 3, 4. And once it is depressed, because it's part of your safety system, the trigger is actually very decent on these. It's got a little bit of pull, a little bit of creep, but it's about 5 pounds, maybe 6 for some. A little clicky, but it's really comfy, frankly. It's not bad at all. And when you're shooting it, you really don't notice it. It actually feels like quite a nice trigger. So yeah, they're not... some were kind of curious if they were awkward to operate, and they're really not. let's disassemble this. I've actually not taken this one apart, so I'm not the most practiced. Obviously, drop your mag. The nice thing is, even doing this, you don't have to worry about decocking it. It's already decocked. The takedown button is back here, spring-loaded. So, it's kind of like your old PPKs and stuff. You just press it in and lift up, if I can. And there you go. You just pull it back a little bit. Your slide, your piston is here. It's quite sharp on the edges. That kind of acts as an automatic carbon scraper and debris remover. It's pinned into your slide here. Of course, you have your mainspring around your barrel. Nothing's fancy there. And you have your barrel pinned into your frame, which gives us quite respectable accuracy. Mechanisms back here, including the takedown. And that's about it. When you go to put it back together, you want to get your piston below where it needs to go. Actually goes back together a little easier. You don't have to pull it back too far. And that is about it, folks. Definitely not a beveled magwell. Again, you can tell 80s style guns, and the grip is relatively thick for a single stack, but still not as thick as the M13, and the mags aren't near as expensive either. Let's move on. Disassembly really is quite straightforward. Got your button here. The only thing you have to do, make sure of is the piston. It actually fits inside a gas tube, if you will, under the barrel. Again, that's where the hot gases can collect and why the heat shield is installed. The barrel on these is typical German HK quality. It is chrome lined. It has polygonal rifling. And the chamber is actually fluted to assist in extraction, ejection, essentially giving it some gas for the cartridge to float on. Can make reloading a little suspect though. Pretty stark feed ramp on this. Very standard mainspring. Your extractor right there. And ejector there. When we were taking photos of this gun, my helper commented, he owns a Makarov, like a lot of us do, that it kind of reminded him of a Makarov, not counting this system. He's not wrong. It's actually very light when you don't have the thing to cock. Because this was designed to be a police gun, and one of the Makarov's positives is its simplicity for both maintenance, cleaning, disassembly, function, and this carries it over. Yeah, just that we get a little closer look. The mags are truly very conventional. I should point out that because the PSP had a heel mag catch and the M8 has this style, it did require a new pattern of magazine with this notch up here. All steel, blued finish. Mechanically quite interesting, and also, yeah, quite fun to fire. Reassembly really is quite simple too. Just making sure your gas piston gets into its little groove, and just pop it down. You don't need to push the button. And I do like to kind of have it set vertical so that the piston kind of falls down into its natural position. Of course, you always want to test a gun after reassembly, but again, simplicity, not a whole lot to goof up. That said, anyone can do anything, trust me. neat guns. J-Row wanted me to reiterate the German date code system, and I do have a funny story I'll tell at the end of this. I'm sure most of you know. It starts with A, and that's 0, and it runs up, like I said, this is IG, which would be 86. Its mags, the mags are also dated. They're actually IH, so 87, which is fine. You can get a pistol that'll have the mags a year off one way or the other, or even the same year. It's just, where they packed them with. They're not serialized to the gun, but the mags should be within the same date range. And yeah, so obviously I would be 8, and then ending with J. But fun story, I was it's after we did the P7-M8 video. Someone was talking about a Bulgarian Arsenal AK, and anyone who knows, they have a serial that starts with two letters, and he was trying to use the German date system to date his Bulgarian AK, and I think his serial started with AE. So I had a little bit of a chuckle when he thought his gun was from 2004, because if you did the German system, yeah, AE would be 2004, but no, the Bulgarian system is totally different, and it actually uses numbers for the year and everything. So it's only really for West Germany and German guns. Of course, Walther uses the same date system as well. But yeah, like I said, J-Ray wanted me to just expand on that, so why not? As for the life and times, like I said, these were introduced, the M8, the M13 in 1983, and they were primarily for the civilian commercial market. The PSP saw more police use, including the federal police in West Germany. Also, GSG had some, but yeah, these were mostly sold, and HK would manufacture them past the West German period and into the 90s. Unlike certain other guns, the assault weapons ban, which limited magazine capacity, obviously didn't impact the M8. It did impact the M13 in America, of course, as well as the Walther P88. But higher and higher German labor costs did impact it. The final run of these was done in 2007, with the final run of M13s in 2008. But they had been slowing down for a long time, and you really start to see the cost rise on these, especially considering it was really meant to be a simple, dependable, and not super expensive to produce gun. For German police departments, they actually had the option. The P5, P6, and P7 were all approved for purchase, and so certain departments would buy one and other, but seems like the P6 was the most popular, with the P7 and P5 being adopted when possible, but cost was kind of a factor. The Swiss/German Sig Sauer was really an effective gun. It's the most conventional out of all three, but still cool. It's just kind of part of the set and part of the series, guys. What do you think? What's your favorite P7? Do you like the PSP, the M8, the M13, or maybe you're a Maverick and you like the M10? Let me know in the comments. Alrighty, guys. I know there wasn't a whole lot new to talk about here, but again, the P7-M8 came along, sitting outside, had a minute, figured why not. Might be a while before we have a chance. But this actually does mean we now have videos. We did an old one on the HK P7 PSP years ago. Again, early this year we did the P7-M13, so now we've done a video on the P7-M8. In the store a few years ago, I did have a P7-M10, which is the 40 Smith & Wesson. It's a 40 Smith & Wesson. Yeah, it is what it is. It's basically the same as an M13. That's pretty much it. Now, there are some weird variants and stuff. I know people in the first video were kind of asking about the squeeze cocker. To squeeze it, it takes a little power, but once it's kind of cocked, You don't have to leave a whole lot of tension on it. Notice it has a little give there. So it kind of has a self-latch in the back until you're really sure you want to let off. So you don't have to squeeze it with the same pressure you did originally. That's just one of the things that I noticed was commented in the previous video. I will say too, the trigger is fine. It's not amazing. It's not a poopy Q trigger even, but it's not god-awful. So what do you think? Do you own a P7? If so, which variant? And if you don't, which one would you like to own? I actually do like the M8. It's probably my favorite. The M13's cool, but it's a little thick. And the PSP is neat, but I don't really care for the fact it doesn't have the heat shield. And I do prefer the mag release on this one versus the PSPs. Personal preference. But I wouldn't say no to any of them if someone gave me one. Unfortunately, they haven't. Anyway, appreciate you tuning in. If you could, please do like, share, and subscribe. And if you'd like to help support the channel, please check out the link to Patreon. This is Misha, and I guess I better get back to real work. Catch you soon next time.